Hi, everyone. So the next session is on collective network communications. So, um, California Relief has started the Network Communications Committee. It started 3 months before last year, so October 2018. And the whole idea about the Communications Committee started when we were working on the shower board campaign for all of you so that you could work on message, so that you can share on social media. And then Cindy and I started talking to Ben, and he said, why don't you come up with a committee and come up with these campaigns or messages that we can use that the whole network can use that are related to the whole state, not just shower board, but there's other tree-related issues that the whole network can use. So, go on to the next one. So we created the communications committee. So this is information. This is information that we want to provide to you, messages about urban forestry related information that we could provide to you so that you, as maybe you're not the biggest nonprofit or your kitchen table, so that you don't have to come up with content for your social media, for your newsletters, for your blogs, but that you're still using information that's related to your community members. In addition to creating these campaigns, the committee is also coming up with a toolkit. Steph is not here from Sacramento Tree Foundation, but her and I are working on a toolkit for the network, and that toolkit is for you, the network members, to kind of guide you on what you can do in local government, how to engage local government, and how to we're being helped by FUV, who did Prop-E, and Eugene, who is working here in LA to helping us on how to engage local government, so how you as a network member can engage local government. Sorry about that. So the committee meets once a month for 1 hour. It's a conference call. I just want to give a shout out to all the people who are in the committee: Sacramento Tree Foundation, Canopy, KYCC, City Plans, Tree People, and FUF. And our city forest, sorry about that. So if you want to be part and be engaged in developing the messaging for these campaigns, please contact me. I'll add you to our calendar invite. So next, I want to introduce Ben Carlson. Ben has provided strategic communications counsel to startup businesses and nonprofits organizations focused on environmental issues, biotech, HIV and AIDS, LGBT issues, and clients of his include AIDS Life Cycle, the SF Opera, Environmental Defense Fund, and the LGBT Historical Society. He has handled public relations for FUV since 2009. So with FUV, he has revamped the brand, expanded subscribers, followers, network, contribute to the development of the SF Urban Forestry Plan, and created messages that were successful in the ballot to create the ballot campaign that they worked on. So, yeah.
Hello, it's great to be here. This is my first California Relief Network conference. I've really enjoyed meeting a lot of folks, including folks who I've spoken on the phone with and corresponded with via email. I am a fan of all of you. I believe you're saving the world. I'm so excited to have a piece of the puzzle, which is to help with communications. We just recently, Friends of the Urban Forest, sent out a fundraising email that begins, people say money doesn't grow on trees. I disagree. This is the voice of Dan Flanagan, our executive director. Everything grows on trees. And the point he goes on to make is that without trees, we don't have a civilization. We're not here. It's that important, the work you do. And so again, I'm so pleased to be working with you. So this is a photograph of San Francisco. It's Portman Square. I think it's looking towards Nob Hill. I really have yet to figure it out exactly. But I like the slide because it shows one of the challenges Friends of the Urban Forest has been up against, which is that San Francisco is sand dunes and shrubs and a handful of trees. One of the communications challenges we have is people occasionally say to us, hey, you should be planting native species, of which we have, I think we can count them on one hand, and not all of them are suitable for planting as street trees. So, it's important to make the point that, well, a metropolis is not native to San Francisco either, but we've got one, and so what are we going to do about it? And trees have got to be a part of that. Whoops, went backwards. Nope. Pardon me. There we go. So I wanted to start by just saying a word about the Relief Network and what a fan I am of the network and to California Relief for bringing us together and giving us an opportunity to share knowledge. We all know that we benefit greatly from California Relief with resources and pass-through grants. And California Relief benefits from us, and the network members benefit from each other. The communications committee that Mariella was talking about is a good example of that, the sort of collective mind. And we aspire over time, as you will see, to collect resources into a centralized place that you have easy access to. And one of the things that we've been doing is coming up with some messaging campaigns that are just, ready to go out of the box that we can then share with you with graphics and messaging that you can deploy to your networks. So I just wanted to see quickly what social media networks you use. We use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We do have YouTube. Sometimes it gets a little neglected. And Flickr. Photos are so important for us. Anybody here using Pinterest in your work? How about Facebook? Facebook for everybody? Yeah, okay. Twitter? Instagram? Okay, so I would say it goes Facebook, Instagram, Twitter in this room. Now what about YouTube? Handful of you, small handful of you have YouTube channels. Okay, LinkedIn? Your organization have a presence on LinkedIn? So just a couple hands there. Nextdoor? All right, few of you. Flickr or other public photo sharing sites. Anybody? All right, so, okay, and other. Anybody use something I didn't mention?
A lot of profiling of the effort in the newspaper.
Okay.
Our community is very low.
Now, are you talking about your own newsletter, or are you talking about local news? And so you pitch stories to your local newspaper, and they pick them up. Terrific. All right, that's great. So the communications committee has been meeting for a few months, and we have come up with some themes for a summer messaging campaign. One of them is that trees mitigate the urban heat island effect, and we're going to deploy that in 3 different ways. Now, this isn't the final wording, but this gives you the gist of it, what we'll be talking about in that campaign. Vulnerable populations, older adults, young children, people who work outdoors, susceptible to heat exhaustion, heat stroke. And then that last point there, more trees means more exercise and more fresh air and all the benefits that come out of that. So we will be putting together some images and some messages to send out for that. Here, the image is courtesy of the Arbor Day Foundation. Urban trees reduce energy costs, another message that's pertinent to the summer months. And sometimes throwing shade is a good thing. Here are messages associated with that. You can just read through them on your own. And I'll go to the next slide. And stop me at any time if you've got a question, please. We will have some time at the end for questions. Water your trees. Now, this is not looking like a drought year when we're going to have some of the more challenging problems we have persuading people that being water responsible doesn't mean starving your trees of water. But nonetheless, with our seasonal rainfall pattern in California, we do need to remind people about watering. So that includes talking about just the challenges that urban trees have finding water when there's a lot of impermeable surfaces surrounding them. Young trees need water to get established. And then earlier today, I've heard different conversations about how to address the issue of expense. Of course, replacing a dead tree with a new tree, you got to factor in all the water that went into growing that new tree. That's a whole lot more water than just keeping the existing tree alive. Mulching the tree basin to retain moisture, we'll have messages around that. All right, so we face a lot of challenges as communicators, and one of the things that I was curious about is who here is in a communications role? It might not be the only hat you wear, but who has primary responsibility for your organization's communications? So it looks like not quite a quarter of the folks here. How many of you have in your organization a full-time person dedicated to marketing/communications? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's more than I was expecting. Friends of the Urban Forest, I'm half-time, and I'm the communications guy. How many people have a part-time, like Friends of the Urban Forest? So about 7, 8. How about a consultant, an outside consultant who handles communications for you? All right, one hand, I see, okay. So effective communications, I think of as vital to an organization's success. Of course, we've all heard that to the hammer, every problem looks like a nail. My hammer is communication, so I think it's a must. Are there communications challenges that aren't up here that you are feeling really challenged by at this time? I'd be curious to hear you call them out. Yes. Equipment. So, for example, printers, okay? So you want to get printed materials out into the community, but right now you're challenged to do that. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, I face that challenge all the time, where they come back at a tiny resolution, or they're just, not taken by somebody who's really good at composing a compelling photo. But boy, when they're good, are they gold? Who else? Communications challenges you're facing? So sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and a bunch of people are involved in communications, but without coordination. Yeah, all right. And then I'll just say a word about trust and credibility down at the bottom. Oh yeah, please. Somebody else? Good storytelling and copywriting, yeah. So getting capturing those stories from the community, noticing the story and saying, hey, wait a minute, that's a great story, and let's capture that. Yeah. Never enough time. Yeah. Yeah, and can you make the time for the communications? With trust and credibility, a challenge that Friends of the Urban Forest has is that sometimes we get confused with the city, with the public works. And you all know about Proposition E because it was such a win a couple years ago when when the voters of San Francisco set aside adequate funding for the city's street tree maintenance. The unfortunate thing is that was after decades of neglect, and many San Franciscans, perhaps most, really have very low expectations and a very low opinion of public works when it comes to urban forestry. And So their sort of default attitude right now is very negative. There's just like, there's no way the city is going to take care of the trees. Look at how it's been so far. And we say, yeah, but we just allocated this big chunk of money to street tree maintenance. Unfortunately, of course, the city is dealing with the worst first. They've got such a backlog of neglected trees that what the public is seeing is a lot of removals happening right now, which, that doesn't look to the public like, our urban forest is thriving. So regaining that trust from the public. Yeah.
To a long-term program at the bottom of your apathy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get the idea, oh, they're all planted everything to worry about.
Yeah, the challenge of apathy. Maybe they cared when the trees were planted. Sure, everybody loves to plant a tree. How many million tree campaigns have we heard of? If it's not followed up by maintenance, you've got a problem. Getting people to care about trees is a big challenge for us every day. A lot of people love them, but they take them for granted. Okay, so just to keep things moving along, we've talked about the campaigns that the communications committee is going to be doing, and I figured I would keep the second half of my presentation just as an overview of some of the wisdom that I've accumulated or the opinions that I want to advance, the things I want to highlight about communications for y'all. And so one of them is the importance of defining your brand. Friends of the Urban Forest is just in the process of completing a 3-year strategic planning process. And I've been with the organization for 10 years, so this is the third planning process I've been through. Always useful exercise for us. And one of the things that we did as part of this process is revisit our mission. We've actually just updated our mission. We simplified it, and our vision. So the vision is the future, the ideal future, when you have fulfilled your mission. This may be the day that you close up shop. That's the vision, and that's what our vision is. And then, what did I do here? There we go. Our values, and then a tagline. A tagline is a useful way to illuminate what your organization does if your name doesn't make it totally clear. Friends of the Urban Forest is reasonably self-explanatory. Here we clarify that San Francisco is where we are Friends of the Urban Forest. And the values, each one of those is fleshed out in our strategic plan, but those are the headlines. Okay, understanding your audiences is, of course, key. One of the ways that you might do that is through the occasional survey of your volunteers and your donors, figuring out what motivates them. A few years back, when we were preparing for Proposition E, we actually did some focus groups, kind of expensive, but at the time, given the expense of the campaign and the importance of figuring out whether voters were ready to support what we were putting on the ballot, we did some professionally organized focus groups. We hired an organization that specializes in that. It was really sobering. You might have heard from other times when Friends of the Urban Forest has been talking about the whole Proposition E adventure, that in these focus groups, we learned that a lot of the benefits messages that we'd been advancing sort of elicited a yawn from a lot of the folks in the room. And it was when we talked about some of the dangers of neglecting your trees. Okay, here's what happens if you don't fund street tree maintenance. We gave this the nickname of Tree-mageddon. What happens? Your trees fall on your kids and on your car, and that got folks' attention. And that's not going to work everywhere, but it did work for us. We did a campaign where we kept reminding people about the consequences of neglect of your urban forest. So a couple of words about the engagement funnel. This is just a simple way of talking about that, is that at the easy, wide end of the funnel, you're getting somebody maybe to like your post on Facebook. It's a very low bar. Maybe they follow you on Facebook because they've seen a few posts that engage them, and now they're exposed to your messages regularly. One day, one of the messages says, hey, give us your email address, and you'll be subscribed to our email newsletter, and here's why you want to do that. You're going to learn about exciting things happening in your community. Now you've got their email address. You can send them a fundraising email message. But again, maybe that's a few months down the line after you've continued to cultivate them. It's just with each step, you're deepening that engagement until eventually they take the action you want them to, donors, volunteers. So that's sort of a simple way to think about your engagement funnel. And messages that mobilize action. So when I think about what images appeal to your heart, or what messages appeal to your heart, I think of images. People planting trees, smiles on their faces, working together out in the sunshine, very powerful. Early in my PR career, I was very focused on arguments as to like, well, here's why you should care, here's why trees are important, and they're all valid arguments. But over time, I've come to appreciate that they are not always the most effective way to move your audience in the direction that you want to, whereas those heart messages, time and again, prove really effective. Frequent messages, I just want to say a word about people send out email campaigns and then they see some people unsubscribe, and you can be panicky about unsubscribes. What did I do wrong? Am I hitting my email list too often, and is that going to make people unsubscribe? And I want to say, hit your list often. Don't worry about the unsubscribes. If people aren't unsubscribing, you're not hitting your list often enough. When people unsubscribe, those are the people who had the weakest connection to you in the first place, and therefore the people you can most afford to lose. Don't lose sleep over them. Keep hitting your list. Tell donors and volunteers their impact. They want to be the hero. One piece of advice I want to give you is that when you're tempted to write, help us plant trees, come help us do this, we're going to be going over here, help us do that. The donor and the volunteer, they don't want to be the hero's helper. They want to be the hero. So plant trees. You did this. You made the Bayview greener. You're not helping us. You're the hero. A personal connection, IU. At Friends of the Urban Forest, a lot of our messaging comes from the voice of Dan Flanagan. Our email messages are signed by Dan. He might not have written them. I probably wrote them. But he's the face of the organization, and he says, I know you care about this. I care about this too. A lot of IU. He's developing a personal relationship. It helps through a face of the organization. It helps your audience have a relationship with the organization. And then let's see. Oh, another thing that I want to steer you away from, a lot of organizations will preface an announcement like this. We're thrilled to announce XYZ. What you're saying to your audience with those words, and it's so common, and I find myself tempted to do it every day. We're excited to announce that today, blah, blah, is we're not interested in what you care about, but let us tell you what gets us excited. Why should you care what we're excited about? Start instead by saying, great news for you. Here's something that's going to benefit you, and here's why. Just skip the part about we're excited. They don't need to hear that you're excited. All right, I'm a little bit of a crank now, but now I've got that out of the way. And so moving along. Okay, so one thing that was at the bottom of the last slide, candy versus vegetables. I want to explain that. This I got from Greg Harrell-Edge, who some of my colleagues remember was formerly the development director at Friends of the Urban Forest. And he had the idea, and I'm sold on this, that your messages kind of fall into two crude categories, one being candy and one being, well, he called it candy versus medicine. I'm going to say vegetables. The candy messages are the messages that the people ended up following you on social media to get in the first place. Those feel-good images, the fun facts about trees, stuff they enjoy. The medicine, the vegetables, we want you to do something. Donate to us. Sign up for this thing. Take this action. Write you're a member of the Board of Supervisors because of XYZ. As long as you're feeding them a lot of candy, you've built up that goodwill. Then you put out the vegetables, they'll eat them. That's what I want to say about that. And so I've just grouped together. I'm just going to, somebody tell me when I'm running long, but I'm going to whip through a few examples of candy versus vegetables messages. This is an article. I know y'all, it's easy to share articles that you find interesting. And then this is factoid, history. And these are examples of messages that people have liked and engaged with. And I actually have a sort of a list I keep in a spreadsheet of the different flavors of candy, historical, profile of a particular species. And if I haven't had one of those kinds of messages recently, I'll put one out there. I'm a friend of the urban forest. Whenever somebody new gets involved with the organization and I can persuade them to write out one of these, I do that and I ask them to say a few words about why they care. Quotable quotes. And as you can see, I try always to pair messages with images, just because if somebody doesn't read the words, they see the image. It's multiple ways to get their attention. Facts about trees, why trees are awesome. And then, geeking out on tree facts. Some members of our community particularly dig that. All right, so now we get into a little of the vegetables. We're asking somebody to donate money to us. We're going to plant a tree in San Francisco in exchange for your $50 donation in honor of somebody. People want to know, well, which tree? And we're a little evasive about that. We're like, it's going to be out there somewhere. All right. So, all right. Here we're asking people to subscribe to our email newsletter. Now, hopefully, we've persuaded them that there's some candy in the newsletter, but here we're asking you to do something for us, because ultimately we're also going to be sending you a fundraising email message. And come volunteer. So we're recruiting volunteers here. And then a shout out to a donor. And this one kind of falls in between. It's not really candy, it's not really medicine. The point of this is then to send a link to the donor saying, hey, we so appreciate your donation. Just wanted to give you a heads up. We thank you on social media. And show them how appreciated they are, and maybe you get that same donation again next year. Here is just a brief trick that I want to share with you if you don't already know about it. Who manages a Facebook page for your organization? So you may or may not occasionally delve into insights, is what Facebook calls it, where you really can drill down on the analytics and see the engagement. But it's real easy when you're scrolling down your page to notice how many people liked it. And if you happen to click, if you were to click on that 85, which is showing how many people liked it, this would pop up. This is the secret part that you might not know about. If somebody's not already following your page, you'll see invite next to their name. You click that, they're now invited. What's going to happen is in their Facebook notifications, they're going to get a notification that Friends of the Urban Forest has invited them to like the page. You can see, most of these people have already liked it. Down there, Mary, you can see she's been invited already. She hasn't responded yet, but hopefully one day she'll notice the invitation. And that's a great way to increase your number of followers over time. So let's take a few minutes for general questions about anything I covered, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Mariella just to talk about some additional resources.
Practice in terms of like sending emails to your subscribers, like your e-blast, your newsletters, and all that stuff. How many times should you hit them like per month?
You know, I can't say that there's going to be one rule of thumb about that. It's going to really have a lot to do with your bandwidth. I suspect that we could hit our email newsletter list more than once a month, but once a month is what we manage to make the time for. And I would say that if you're not hitting them at least once a quarter, you're really missing an opportunity to the extent that you rely on your network to take action, because your newsletter is an opportunity to let them know about opportunities to take action.
Questions?
So, I feel like an issue of push-pull is like just continuing to grind out messaging versus thinking through like themes. So what is the structure? What is the structure you use to build a communications concept or follow a communications plan?
Yeah, that often flows from the priorities of the organization. So right now, we have sort of conquered the challenge in San Francisco of funding street tree maintenance, but Prop E did not have any money for planting. And what's happening now, as I mentioned earlier, is a lot of trees are being removed. Meanwhile, just due to the natural mortality of the urban forest, our urban forest is shrinking. We are not planting at a one-to-one, to compensate for the loss of trees. And San Francisco already has a pretty skimpy tree canopy compared to other major cities. So our next big push is going to be to get the city to allocate money for planting. And of course, that's going to have to be supplemented by money from corporations and foundations and private donors. And so building messaging around that is one of the things foremost on my mind. I'm a bit of an ambulance chaser when it comes to communications. And what I mean by that is when a topic spikes in the news that you can plausibly connect your issue to, that's an opportunity to build a message around that issue, not because that issue is necessarily your priority at that moment, but because a window has opened, a window of opportunity has opened for you to leverage that public interest in that issue. So climate change, I mentioned earlier right now, I'm excited about the possibility of promoting trees as a climate solution. That's not even really a spike. That's going to be with us for a long time. And I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity to build a strong connection in the public mind between trees and mitigating global warming, climate crisis. Somebody reminded me earlier, not climate change. So, thinking through how to take your organization's priorities and then what audiences need to take action in order for those priorities to be achieved. It might be volunteers, might be donors, might be both, might be legislators. Next, what messages would motivate them to take those actions? So knowing something about them and what their motives are, creating messages, and then figuring out how to deliver those messages to them. What are the communications channels that they're paying attention to? So that's kind of a way to create some structure for your communications program. And then, of course, once you've come up with a piece of communications content, you can deploy it in a whole bunch of different ways. There's going to be your website, your social media, your email newsletter, and the newspaper, right? Somebody else had a question?
So we're kind of running short on time. So I just want to point out some resources. Some people have emailed me like, what is social media? Ken, that was you. So I just wanted to point out some resources on like how, I didn't see everyone raise their hand when it came to like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms. So if you go to our YouTube page, we have a playlist called, can you click it? It says how to social media, and basically you have like Facebook 101, social media 101, Twitter 101, and it shows you how to like create it, how to use it. We also have photos 101, how to take photos so that you can use those amazing photos for your social media. Um, so yeah, and if you want me to send you the link to it, just send me an email. Or if you have any other questions about social media, send me an email. Yeah. Um, so I was just going to wrap it up. So if you have a question.
Trying to find audiences that are not already used to reading related or I think we all have to do a better job of expanding.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, I was just going to say for the webcast that the point was that we have to do a better job of expanding our messages to people who aren't already receiving them. We're preaching to the converted, and how do we start preaching to the folks who aren't really thinking about our issues yet? Yep, it's one of our challenges.
thank you, everyone.